Dear children, today we are going to learn Chapter 7, the print culture. The earliest kind of print technology was developed in China, Japan and Korea. The earliest kind of print technology was based on manual hand printing. From AD 594 onwards, books in China were printed by rubbing paper that was also invented there against the inked surface of wood blocks. The sheets thus prepared were very thin and porous.
These papers were folded and stitched at the side, and it was known as accordion book. Skilled craftsmen wrote on these books in beautiful calligraphy. So what is calligraphy? The art of beautiful and stylized writing. Which country was the major producer of printed material and why? The imperial state of China was for a very long time the major producer of printed material. The reasons? The first one, huge bureaucratic system. China possessed a huge bureaucratic system which recruited its personnel through civil service examinations. Second reason, printing of textbooks. Textbooks for this examination were printed in vast numbers under the sponsorship of the imperial state. Third one, increase in the number of candidates. From the 16th century, the number of examination candidates went up, and that increased the volume of print. This is an example of calligraphy writing. This is how the ancient Chinese wrote on their books.
Diverse use of print in China. By the 17th century, as urban culture bloomed in China, the uses of print diversified. Print was no longer used just by scholar officials. The first one, to collect trade information. Merchants used print in their everyday life as they collected trade information. Second one, reading. Reading increasingly became a leisure activity. The new readership preferred fictional narratives, poetry, autobiographies, anthologies of literary masterpieces, and romantic plays. The next reason is publishing. Rich women began to read, and many women began publishing their poetry and plays. Wives of scholar officials published their works. The interesting publishing practices of the late 18th century. Printing of visual material led to interesting publishing practices. In the late 18th century, in the flourishing urban circles at Edo, later it was known as Tokyo, illustrated collections of paintings depicted an elegant urban culture involving artisans, courtesans, and tea house gatherings. Libraries and bookstores were packed with hand-printed material of various types, books on women, musical instruments, calculations, tea ceremony, flower arrangements, proper etiquette, cooking, and famous places. The rise of print culture in Europe. In the 11th century, Chinese paper reached Europe via the Silk Route. Paper made possible the production of manuscripts carefully written by scribes. Then in 1295, Marco Polo, a great explorer, returned to Italy after many years of exploration in China. China already had the knowledge of woodblock printing. Marco Polo brought this knowledge back with him. Now, Italians began producing books with the woodblocks, and soon the technology spread to other parts of Europe. Luxury editions were still handwritten on very expensive vellum, meant for aristocratic circles and rich monastic libraries, which scoffed at printed books as cheap vulgarities. Merchants and students in the university towns bought the cheaper printed copies. What steps were taken by the booksellers to meet the increasing demand for books? As the demand for books increased, booksellers all over Europe began exporting books to many different countries. Book fairs were held at different places. Production of handwritten manuscripts was also organized in new ways to meet the expanded demand. Scribes or skilled handwriters were employed by wealthy or influential patrons as well as by booksellers. More than 50 scribes often worked for one bookseller.
What were the limitations of manuscripts? The production of handwritten manuscripts could not satisfy the ever-increasing demand for books. Copying was an expensive, laborious, and time-consuming business. Manuscripts were fragile, awkward to handle, and could not be carried around or read easily. Their circulation remained limited. With the growing demand for books, woodblock printing gradually became more and more popular.
Gutenberg and the printing press. Gutenberg was the son of a merchant and grew up on a large agricultural estate. From his childhood, he had seen wine and olive presses. Subsequently, he learned the art of polishing stones, became a master goldsmith, and also acquired the expertise to create lead molds used for making trinkets. Gutenberg adapted existing technology to design his innovation. The olive press provided the model for the printing press, and molds were used for casting the metal types for the letters of the alphabet. By 1448, Gutenberg perfected the system. The first book he printed was the Bible. About 180 copies were printed, and it took 3 years to produce them. By the standards of the time, this was fast production.
Features of the early printed books. Printed books at first closely resembled the written manuscripts in appearance and layout. The metal letters imitated the ornamental handwritten styles. Borders were illuminated by hand with the foliage and other patterns, and illustrations were painted. In the books printed for the rich, space for decoration was kept blank on the printed page. Each purchaser could choose the design and decide on the painting school that would do the illustrations. This shift from hand printing to mechanical printing led to the print revolution.
What was the impact of the print revolution in Europe? The first one, emergence of a new reading public. Printing reduced the cost of books. The time and labor required to produce each book came down, and multiple copies could be produced with greater ease. Books flooded the market, reaching out to ever-growing readership.
Next one, emergence of a hearing public. Earlier, books could be read by only a small number of people, particularly the elite, as the number of literates in Europe was very low till the 20th century. publishers started publishing popular ballads, folk tales with beautiful pictures and illustrations. These were then sung at village gatherings. Knowledge was transferred orally. People collectively heard a story or saw a performance. Thus, a hearing and reading public became intermingled. The next topic is print and Protestant Reformation. Print created the possibility of wide circulation of ideas and introduced a new world of debate and discussion. Even those who disagreed with the established authorities could now print and circulate their ideas. Example, Martin Luther. He was a German monk, priest, professor and church reformer. In 1517, he wrote 95 theses and openly criticized the rituals and practices of the Roman Catholic Church. A printed copy of his 95 theses was posted on the church door at Wittenberg. It challenged the church to debate his ideas. Luther's writings were immediately produced in large numbers and were read widely. This led to the division within the church and the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Print and dissent. Print and popular religious literature encouraged many individual interpretations of faith even among little educated working people. In the 16th century, Minocchio, a miller in Italy, began to read books that were available in his locality. He reinterpreted the message of the Bible and formulated a view of God and creation that enraged the Roman Catholic Church.
The Roman Catholic Church executed Minocchio. The Roman Church imposed severe controls over publishers and booksellers and began to maintain an index of prohibited books from 1558.
Next, the reading mania. Churches of different denominations set up schools in villages carrying literacy to peasants and artisans. By the end of the 18th century, in some parts of Europe, literacy rates were as high as 60 to 80%. As literacy and schools spread in European countries, there was a virtual reading mania. People wanted books to read and printers produced books in ever-increasing numbers. The new forms of popular literature prevalent in Europe. New forms of popular literature appeared in print targeting new audiences. Booksellers employed peddlers who roamed around villages carrying little books for sale. There were almanacs or ritual calendars along with ballads and folk tales. But other forms of reading matter, largely for entertainment, began to reach ordinary readers as well. In England, penny chapbooks were carried by petty peddlers known as chapmen and sold for a penny so that even the poor could buy them. In France, where the Bibliothèque Bleue, which were low-priced small books printed on poor quality paper and bound in cheap blue covers. Then there were the romances printed on 4 to 6 pages and the substantial histories, which were stories about the past. Books were of various sizes, serving purposes and interests. The periodical press, developed from the early 18th century, published information about current affairs and entertainment. Newspapers and journals carried information about wars and trade as well as news of developments in other places. Similarly, the ideas of scientists and philosophers now became more accessible to the common people. Ancient and medieval scientific texts were compiled and published, and maps and scientific diagrams were widely printed. When scientists like Isaac Newton began to publish their discoveries, they could influence a much wider circle of scientifically minded readers. The writings of thinkers such as Thomas Paine, Voltaire, and Rousseau were also widely printed and read. Thus, their ideas about science, reason, and rationality found their way into popular literature. Louis Sébastien Mercier. Louis Sébastien Mercier, a novelist in the 18th century France, declared, "The printing press is the most powerful engine of progress, and public opinion is the force that will sweep despotism away." In many of Mercier's novels, the heroes are changed by acts of reading. They devour books, are lost in the world of books, and become enlightened in the process. Mercier proclaimed, "Tremble, therefore, tyrants of the world, tremble before the virtual writer."